figures of speech, these are some of the things that we can begin to unpack and see written throughout the text. These are a little more understanding mentally than they are kind of seeing them. You're not seeing repeated words. You're looking at things a little bit differently of how the text is making it up or how the text is coming together. So the first one, allegory. Allegories are stories, poems, writing that kind of reveal a hidden meaning or a picture in your mind, right? So Hosea 11:1 says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. So the picture, the allegory, the imagery that God is showcasing is himself as a father, taking the baby Israel out of Egypt and holding him, kind of holding him to his chest. And so it showcases a different aspect of God in that way. Look for things, literal things that are written in the text. Water coming from a rock, that's literal. Sounds nuts, but it's literal, right? Water coming from a rock. Saul actually talking to the prophet Samuel after he had died through that medium. That's a literal text. The sun stopping in the sky for Joshua while he's fighting. Joshua asked God to stop the sun, hold it in the air for 12 more hours so that he could fight and defeat this army essentially by himself. And God does it. There's a literal aspect to it. That story was translated literally. And so we have to begin to find those things. Look for things like similes, comparing like or as. Matthew 24:27 says, for as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So the fact that we can look across the horizon and see lightning from one horizon to the other is the same depiction that the author's trying to show that when Jesus returns, everybody's going to know. It's going to be across the spectrum that everybody will see his return. Look for metaphors. Something that is described in other things. Believers as a flock of sheep. Jesus as a shepherd. Prophecy in Daniel and Revelation showcasing different beasts and different imagery that is going on there. Look for the metaphors that it's trying to show. Anthropomorphism is essentially God described in human form. Zoomorphism is God described in animal form. In Deuteronomy 32:11, it says, like an eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, that spreads its wings to catch them and carries them on its pinions, is the same as God. He's trying to showcase God as this fatherly eagle who's taking care of his young, who's taking care of his people. And so it essentially gives us a visual insight into the character and nature of God. Personification, personal qualities given to an object. In the Psalms, they do this a lot. You hear the mountains skipping. You hear the rocks crying out, different things like that. So he's showcasing personification, human attributes given to objects. Euphemisms, the study or substitution of one word for another. The substitution of sex in the Bible to saying lay with their wife or laid with her. And so choosing a euphemism, a different change of word. Or hyperbole, an exaggeration. Jesus says, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. Don't take that literal. Don't read that as a literal. That's a hyperbole. If your left hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Bad idea. Good truth to it. Bad to try and infer it as a literal statement. If you studied the church history, there were a lot of people who actually took that as literal and they wound up with no eyes and no hands. But, and here comes irony, right? There you go. Irony. Literal meaning is opposite of the real meaning. In the book of Hebrews, the author calls out the church and he says, I wish you were adults. You are babies still drinking milk. I wish you were adults. He's like, you've been Christians for 20 years and yet you're still babies. You're still drinking milk. I want you to be adults. So look for those things as we uncover the text. Notice the textual structures, the textual variances, and realize how they can actually speak to the truth behind each of these texts.